Welcome to the Cheating Wife Stories channel. It all began 6 months earlier when Jessie first crossed paths with Craig at a professional networking event hosted by a local marketing firm. Jessie, an ambitious project manager at a real estate firm, was immediately drawn to Craig's easy charm and quick wit. Their conversation flowed effortlessly, sparking a connection neither had expected. By the end of the evening, they had exchanged numbers under the guise of sharing industry insights. The messages started innocently enough. Brief exchanges about work, shared interests, and jokes about the dullness of corporate life. But over time, the messages grew more personal. Craig revealed he felt trapped in a stagnant marriage, and Jessie confided about feeling underappreciated at home. These shared frustrations drew them closer, and soon, the line between casual friendship and emotional closeness blurred. Jessie's life at home, though stable, had long felt devoid of excitement. Her husband Mark was kind and reliable, but preoccupied with managing their household and raising their 3 children. Their once passionate relationship had settled into a predictable routine, leaving Jessie yearning for something more. Her guilt over these feelings was eclipsed by the exhilaration of her growing bond with Craig. Craig, a sales executive with a magnetic personality, often shared tales of his younger carefree days traveling the world. These stories captivated Jessie, fueling her fantasies of an adventurous life beyond her suburban existence. Craig suggested a trip to Malta, a place he described as magical and transformative. Though hesitant at first, Jessie found herself unable to resist the allure of the escape he painted so vividly. As their plans took shape, Jessie devised a cover story to ensure her family remained unsuspecting. She told her husband she was attending an out-of-state training workshop and arranged for her children to stay with her in-laws. The meticulous planning brought an unexpected thrill, making the trip feel even more like a forbidden adventure. The night before their departure, Jessie sat alone in her home office, staring at a draft of a letter she had written to her husband. It was meant to soften the blow if he ever discovered the truth. The letter spoke of her deep love for him and their family, but hinted at her longing for personal growth and independence. She hesitated before sealing it in an envelope and slipping it under his pillow. Little did she know, this single act would set a chain of events in motion that neither she nor Craig could control. Jessie and Craig were seated together in the bustling airport lounge, waiting to board their flight to Malta. After weeks of meticulous organizing and mounting excitement, their long-anticipated getaway was finally underway. Jessie, her energy drained from the late-night packing, shut her eyes while holding Craig's hand. The prospect of 2 weeks of relaxation and indulgence seemed like the perfect retreat. Their calm was disrupted by the ding of Craig's phone. As he glanced at the screen, he casually reminded Jessie, "Don't forget to put your phone on airplane mode." "I didn't bring it," she said, shrugging off the remark. Craig's expression suddenly tightened as he read a message on his phone. "Craig, touch that woman and you'll regret it for the rest of your life." Alarmed, Jessie noticed his reaction. "What's wrong?" she asked. Instead of answering, Craig handed her the phone. "Craig, you're unbelievable," Jessie said, exasperated. "You should have warned your wife." "She already knows," Craig admitted, attempting to downplay the situation. He explained he had told his wife he was attending a 2-week training course and packed while she was asleep. "No one could possibly know about us," he reassured her. "Are you certain?" Jessie pressed, doubt creeping into her voice. "Yes," Craig insisted, though his eyes darted around the room, betraying his unease. He suggested they check in with their respective partners to ensure everything was fine. Craig called his wife, but the call went unanswered, forcing him to leave a breezy voicemail. Jessie, however, declined to contact her husband. Their conversation was cut short by the boarding announcement. As they joined the line, the earlier closeness between them had been replaced by a tense silence. Craig continued to scan the crowd, searching for any familiar faces. Once aboard, Jessie rested her head on Craig's shoulder, entwining her arm with his. "Why didn't you bring your phone?" Craig asked. "It's part of my plan," Jessie said cryptically. "You'll understand soon." After the plane reached cruising altitude, Jessie retrieved her laptop, opened a document, and handed it to Craig. "I've been thinking this through," she said. "This letter is for my husband. He'll find it tonight, and it will give him 2 weeks to decide. Depending on his response, this trip could mark a new chapter for us, or a return to the old." The letter read, "Dear husband, I've loved you deeply for the past 25 years. Our life together, the family we've built, and the bond we share mean everything to me. You've been a wonderful partner, and I am truly grateful for all that we have. But there's something I need to tell you. For years, I've poured myself into our family, rarely asking for anything for myself. Now I feel the time has come to propose something important. I'm away for 2 weeks, not for work, as I told you, but to reflect. I've left my phone behind because I want you to consider what I'm about to say without distractions or confrontation. I cherish our marriage, but I also find myself longing for experiences that I believe we can navigate together with your understanding and support. I'm asking for your permission to explore connections outside our marriage. My love for you remains unwavering. You will always be my priority. If you agree, I promise to be discreet and respectful of our relationship. If this ever becomes public knowledge, I'll stop immediately. If you disagree, I will honor your decision and will move forward as we always have. Please take these 2 weeks to think about it. I trust you to decide with the care and love you've always shown me. Whatever your answer, I will respect it. Yours always, Jessie." Craig finished reading and looked up. "Wow." Jessie smiled. "It's good, isn't it? I did borrow a bit of phrasing from a story on an erotic fiction site." Craig raised an eyebrow. "You're calling this an investment in your future. Why?" "It's simple," Jessie said. "I'm asking my husband for permission to step outside our marriage. If he agrees, I can live without guilt. If he doesn't, well, I'll know where I stand. And let's be honest, replacing you would be its own challenge." "You really think he'll agree?" Craig asked skeptically. "Absolutely," Jessie replied. "I framed it as his choice. If he says no, we'll keep sneaking around. If he says yes, it's a win. He'll think he's in control." Craig frowned. "It's not logical to him. It's emotional. That letter basically tells him he's not enough. No man wants to hear that. He'll either fight back or fold." "You don't know him like I do," Jessie said confidently. "He values honesty. This is a calculated risk." Craig studied her, unsettled by her cold pragmatism. While he wasn't averse to bending the truth for his own gain, Jessie's calculated approach struck him as unnerving. His curiosity got the better of him. "So how did the story you borrowed from end? Did the woman get what she wanted?" Jessie's expression darkened. "No, her husband kicked her out, and she realized she'd made a terrible mistake." Sensing her discomfort, Craig shifted the topic. "Speaking of strange things, I saw something weird at the terminal. A guy kept staring at me. When I looked at him, he made a throat-slashing gesture. Freaked me out." Jessie raised an eyebrow. "What did he look like?" "Tall, over 6 feet, dark hair, goatee. Just a regular guy," Craig said, shrugging. Jessie's expression shifted as she opened her laptop, pulling up a picture of herself standing beside a man in front of a house. Her voice quivered as she asked, "Was this the guy you saw?" Craig squinted at the image. "Maybe. I'm not entirely sure." She scrutinized Craig's face, wondering whether he was being truthful or trying to hide something. Could he be covering up the possibility that her husband had discovered their affair? For the first time, doubt crept in. Craig was unfaithful to his wife. Could he really be trusted? "What was he wearing?" Jessie pressed. Craig shrugged, clearly annoyed. "Jessie, guys don't pay attention to that kind of thing." Undeterred, she continued. "Didn't you say my husband dropped you off at the domestic terminal?" "Yeah, but I made sure he drove off before I took the bus to the international terminal," Craig replied confidently. "He'd have to park, figure out where I went, and track me down through check-in. It's not likely." Despite Craig's reassurances, Jesse's unease didn't fade. Sensing her persistence, Craig decided to pivot the conversation. "Is that your house in the photo?" Jesse, momentarily distracted, answered automatically. "Yes, that's ours. We bought the land as an investment. It's a steep, narrow beach property. My husband spent over 15 years designing and building it himself, piece by piece. Every room has its own unique mural, nautical designs in the bathrooms, a business motif in the study, even with a creek running beneath the house. He incorporated it into the design. It's won architectural awards." Craig nodded politely, but his thoughts were elsewhere. He couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that someone, maybe Jesse's husband, was already one step ahead of them. The conversation meandered to family, a subject they usually avoided. Craig mentioned his 2 kids, ages 6 and 8, while Jessie spoke about her 3. Chloe, 23, a newly minted real estate attorney, and her teenage sons, Ethan, 16, and Leo, 13. Still uneasy, Jessie tried to refocus. She jotted down a mental checklist. Lawyer, home, kids. Her thoughts raced toward contingency plans, how to protect her family and assets if everything fell apart. The silence between them deepened, and Jessie chastised herself for not being more cautious. She replayed the events leading up to their departure. Thursday night, she had meticulously packed for the trip, ensuring her choices matched the cover story of a work conference. Her husband had seemed normal, even affectionate, as they spent the evening together. Friday had followed the usual routine. Jessie went to work, arranged for her husband to pick her up since her company car was in for service, and shared lunch with the kids. Later, they dropped the boys at their grandparents' house and spent a quiet evening together. Jessie's excitement for the trip had blinded her to any potential red flags. On Saturday morning, she convinced her husband to help her check her bags and leave quickly, a break from his usual habit of lingering. His easy compliance, which had initially relieved her, now felt suspicious. Had he suspected something? Despite her careful planning, Jessie clung to the idea that her husband was in the dark. He didn't know her coworkers, and no one from work knew the truth about the trip. Craig's unsettling text, probably a prank. The man Craig saw at the terminal, just a stranger with bad manners. She repeated these reassurances to herself. Even if her husband pieced things together, the letter she'd left behind provided plausible deniability. It framed the trip as a getaway with a colleague. Still, Jessie felt the need to shore up her defenses. She decided to have Chloe discreetly retrieve the letter she'd left under her husband's pillow. During the flight, Jessie drafted a message to her daughter, explaining she'd forgotten her phone at home and needed Chloe to activate Craig's number for contact, claiming she'd purchased a prepaid phone for the trip. Jessie also instructed Chloe to find the letter, calling it deeply personal, and meant only for her husband. She trusted Chloe's loyalty and discretion. Once they landed in Malta, Jessie emailed Chloe and used Craig's phone to call her husband. There was no answer. Hours later, worry gnawed at her as they settled into their hotel. Finally, Chloe called back on Craig's phone, confirming she'd followed her mother's instructions, but adding a troubling detail. Her father had taken Ethan and Leo to the family's remote lake house for the weekend. He'd called her earlier, sounding preoccupied, and said he needed time to think. Chloe planned to join them that evening. Jessie froze. Her husband hadn't mentioned going to the lake house, a secluded property without modern communication. The realization left her shaken. She ended the call without asking further questions, unable to process the implications. Meanwhile, her husband at the lake house prepared a barbecue for the kids. They begged him to take them camping the next day to hunt rabbits for stew. Chloe noticed he seemed preoccupied and decided to gently confront him during a family meeting. "Is it about Mom?" Chloe asked. "Yeah," he admitted with a heavy sigh. "She's been acting distant for months, and now, after yesterday and this morning, I've learned a few troubling things." The room was heavy with tension as he sighed, completing his thought. They'd always seen him as strong and cheerful, rarely this serious. The silence stretched. "Your mom told me she was going on a 2-week work course overseas," he began. The kids immediately replied, "She told us the same thing." He continued, "Yesterday, I picked her up from work. While waiting, I saw her talking to a man in his office. Something about their posture and expressions felt off. She took over 5 minutes to come out. Meanwhile, I saw his photo on the company wall. His name is Craig Bauer. I even picked up his business card from the front desk. This morning, I couldn't sleep and looked in your mom's purse. I found her passport and noticed a Maltese visa stamped 3 weeks ago. I remembered her reading a Malta travel brochure last month." Pausing, he looked at his children before continuing. "Malta is not interstate. She lied about her destination, but accusing someone you love of cheating without proof is serious." Chloe spoke up. "We understand, Dad. You and Mom taught us to never cheat, never lie, and always respect others. I think your mom was." He nodded. "That's why this is so hard. This morning, your mom asked me to drop her at the domestic terminal and leave. That was unusual. Normally, I'd stay until her flight departed. So I went to the international terminal instead. I saw Craig Bauer checking in, and 15 minutes later, your mom showed up and checked in too. I was too shocked to confront her." Chloe hesitated. "Do you think she's—" "Yes, Chloe," he said heavily. "She lied to us and went to Malta for an affair." Turning away, he tried to mask his pain, but it was obvious. One by one, the kids embraced him, starting with Ethan. Chloe stepped back and looked up at him. "What are you going to do, Dad?" she asked softly. He sighed heavily. "I don't know yet," he admitted. "If she's been unfaithful, it's over. Fidelity is non-negotiable. Even if she hasn't slept with him, I don't know if I can move past this. For now, I sent them a message warning there will be consequences if they touch each other. It buys me time to decide." Chloe tilted her head, concern etched on her face. "But Dad, Mom left her phone at home," she said carefully. "She wouldn't have seen your message." Her father's expression darkened as he frowned. "What number did she give you to contact her?" he asked, his tone sharpening. Chloe pulled up Jesse's instructions on her phone, read the first 6 digits, and he completed the last 4 from Craig's business card. This simple act confirmed the truth for everyone in the room. Silence fell. "There's more," Chloe added. "Mom asked me to retrieve a letter from under her pillow and bring it to you." She handed him the letter. After hesitating, he began to read. Leo broke the impasse. "Dad, this is about our family. We make big decisions together. You have to tell us." Moved by his youngest son's determination, Mark read the letter aloud. One sentence in the 3rd paragraph stood out. "I'm going away for 2 weeks with a friend from work. I have never been unfaithful to you. And without your full blessing, I never will be." That single proven lie cast doubt over the entire letter. For the next hour, they debated the situation, analyzing Jesse's motives. They reached an unsettling conclusion. Depending on one key detail, Jessie might have forfeited her place in the family. Mark tried to defend her. "Kids, if there's a betrayal, it's against me as her husband. Don't let this change how you feel about her." Leo responded firmly. "No, Dad. The moment she lied to all of us, she removed herself from this family." Mark studied his son's resolute face and realized the strength of his convictions. Leo's words carried the weight of truth. At the hotel reception, Jessie surprised Craig by requesting a private room on another floor. She booked it for 2 nights with the option to extend, ensuring priority if the room filled up. When Craig questioned her decision, she instructed him to unpack in his room and meet her in the lobby in 2 hours. Embarrassed but compliant, Craig agreed. When they met, Craig couldn't help but admire Jessie's striking outfit, momentarily forgetting the odd situation. Their month-long closeness had been limited to kissing and touching, and Craig was eager for more. "What's going on, Jessie?" he asked. "Think about it, Craig," Jessie said sharply. "We planned this trip together, but you received a threatening message by name. warning you not to touch me. Then a man resembling my husband made a threatening gesture at you. Now my husband isn't answering my calls, which is completely unlike him." Craig grasped the implications but didn't see how it concerned him. Jesse pressed on. "I think there's an 80% chance my husband knows we're here. If he confirms we slept together, my marriage is over, and I'm not ready for that. If he doesn't know, I can't explain coming home early without lying. After 25 years, he'll spot a lie immediately. Until I confirm he knows nothing, we're not sleeping together." Craig looked disappointed, but Jesse waved him off before he could argue. "If you were my husband and suspected me of cheating, how would you handle it?" she asked. "Easy," Craig said. "I'd hire a private investigator." Seeing his realization dawn, Jesse added, "Did you try calling your wife since we arrived?" Craig glanced nervously around the lobby, as though searching for cameras. Jesse said firmly, "Now you get it. Stay away from my room. Don't touch me. And notify me immediately if my husband calls. Here's a list of the numbers he might use. Now give me a friendly kiss on the cheek, and we'll part for now." Craig complied, and they retreated to their rooms, both wary of being watched. Had either checked the number from Craig's threatening message, they might have realized Jessie was already a sufferer of her husband's suspicions. Over the next 4 days, the trip unfolded awkwardly. They ate at the hotel restaurant, avoided physical contact, and spent every day together in case Jessie's husband called. Jessie dragged Craig to clothing stores and on a day trip on Tuesday, though Craig grew increasingly restless. On Monday, she bought a disposable phone and had Craig practice switching to it in case of a suspicious call. Her concern deepened when Chloe stopped responding to emails, though she rationalized that Mark might have extended a trip to their lake house with the kids. By Tuesday night, Craig's patience ran out. He discreetly booked another room, left unnoticed, and spent the night with a Javanese escort. Meanwhile, Jessie's anxiety escalated. She stayed in her room researching divorce and emailed the family lawyer for advice. He confirmed her assumptions about a potential divorce, though he admitted it wasn't his specialty. By Friday, convinced her husband knew, Jessie took action to secure her family's finances. She instructed her lawyer to lock down assets and transferred ownership of their last vacant property into a trust shared with Chloe. She also set up separate trusts for her 2 younger children, requiring dual signatures, one from the child, valid only when they turned 18, and one from a legal guardian, whom the lawyer recommended be himself rather than Jessie. With her family's finances protected, Jessie felt a slight sense of relief. If it turned out to be a false alarm, she could undo the changes. That night, she slept more soundly than she had all week. On Saturday, Jessie's world unraveled with 2 devastating revelations in quick succession. First, Craig broke her rules by visiting her room. He confessed that his wife, Diana, who had been unresponsive, had asked his brother where to send divorce papers. Diana had discovered Craig was on annual leave, not a business trip, and confronted him. Craig realized this was how Mark had learned of the trip. He immediately decided to return home to manage the fallout. Jessie, shaken, contacted her lawyer to finalize all financial changes. She escorted Craig to the airport and then moved into his now empty room. The second bombshell came from a Facebook post on Leo's account announcing his parents' divorce. Stunned, Jessie screamed, "What's Mark doing?" She reflected bitterly. Divorce, she thought, should involve discussions and explanations, not unilateral declarations. Mark had always supported her career, allowing her to become the breadwinner while he stayed home with the kids. Yet now, he was turning the family against her. Jessie prayed for a sign to stop her plans before it was too late. As her panic subsided, Jessie analyzed the situation rationally. Someone, likely Diana, must have exposed her trip to Mark. If Chloe had disobeyed instructions and shown her father the letter Jessie had written, the situation would be even worse. Reading the letter again, Jessie saw its flaws. Truths mixed with lies, promises that now rang hollow. If Mark had seen it, She realized he would question everything, including her assurances of fidelity and her praise of him as a lover. Jessie's greatest concern was Mark's wounded ego. She hadn't physically betrayed him, but the letter and circumstances suggested otherwise. She clung to the hope that a private investigator's report would confirm her innocence, at least in Malta. Reflecting on her actions, Jessie felt a grim irony. She was the archetypal wife who had it all, yet she risked everything for a fleeting desire to rewrite her future. Now she faced losing her family, and still hadn't satisfied her craving. Determined to salvage the situation, Jessie made plans to return home early. She wrote a vague letter to Mark, sent through Chloe, hoping to delay any irreversible decisions. She also scheduled an appointment with a marriage counselor. Meanwhile, back home, Chloe overheard Mark talking with their neighbor, Max Martin, a lawyer. "So, besides informing Diana, what else have you done, Mark?" Max asked. "Nothing yet," Mark replied. "I'm waiting to hear what Jessie has to say before deciding on divorce." Chloe interjected sharply. "Dad, stop being naive. Mom's lawyer had me sign a trust agreement that effectively removes your control over family assets. She's emptied most of the accounts. She's already making her move against you." Mark listened quietly, his face a mix of hurt and disbelief as Chloe laid bare Jessie's apparent betrayal. Chloe handed her father a printed letter from Jessie. He read it, then passed it to Max. "Dear Chloe, please print the attached document and give it to your father. I trust your discretion not to read it. This is personal between him and me. Dear Mark, I assume you now know I lied about my trip's purpose and destination. When I return, I hope we can talk, and you'll listen to my apology for the mistake I've made with the patience you've always shown. Please remember 2 things before doing anything drastic. 1, I love you and only you. Always have and always will. 2, since we became exclusive, I've been faithful to you. I know my actions have caused doubt, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to prove my fidelity. Arrange for a lie detector test upon my return, and I'll take it, answering any questions you want. After resolving this, I'll apologize for the disrespect you feel I've shown. Please don't do anything rash. Divorce will devastate us both. You'd lose the house you love and half of our early retirement funds. Think about the children. Divorce divides families. Custody battles would hurt us all. Please give me a chance to explain when I return. Your loving wife, Jessie." After reading the letter, Max remarked, "If we didn't know what she's been doing, this letter would seem compelling." Mark furrowed his brow. "What do you mean?" Max leaned forward, his tone steady. "Mark, in my line of work, I see these situations all the time. This looks like a textbook case. She wants out, found a replacement, and took him for a test drive on this trip. If he proved suitable, her plan was likely to quietly move assets, poison your relationship with the kids, and file for divorce. Writing a letter like this and letting Chloe see it makes you appear weak, which makes it easier for the kids to side with her. The goal: leave you penniless and isolated." Mark shook his head. "That sounds extreme." Max's eyes narrowed. "I can prove it. Call 3 top divorce attorneys in town. If any refuse your case, it's likely because she's already hired them. It's a common tactic to prevent them from representing you." Skeptical but willing to try, Mark followed Max's advice. He called a top attorney, only to be told they couldn't take his case. Unbeknownst to him, the reason was the firm's heavy workload, not Jessie's interference. When Mark returned to the room, he sighed. "Okay, Max, I believe you. What should I do?" Max didn't hesitate. "First, block all financial accounts she doesn't control and restrict joint spending. Cancel any shared credit cards immediately." Mark paused, conflicted. "I still want to believe she loves me, but the second half of her letter doesn't align with that." Chloe, who had been quietly listening, spoke up. "Dad, are you sure Mom lied to you?" "Yes," Mark said, his voice firm. Chloe met his gaze. "Do you lie to people you love?" "No," Mark replied, his tone softening. "What are the 3 pillars of a partnership you've always taught us?" she asked. "Love, trust, and respect. How many of those do you still have with her?" Chloe pressed. "1," he admitted. "And how much is Mom showing you now?" Chloe pressed. "None," Mark acknowledged. "Exactly," Chloe said, her exasperation cutting through the room's tension. When Jessie tried to pay the fee to change her flight, her credit cards were declined. Panicked, she rushed to an ATM, but her card was also rejected. Realizing she had limited options, she quickly assessed her situation. Her hotel and meals were prepaid, so she wouldn't be left homeless or starving. And she had a few hundred in traveler's checks, though not enough to last. Asking her parents for money would raise questions she wanted to avoid. Jessie emailed her lawyer to inquire about the frozen accounts and prepared for a dull, low-budget week before her flight home. Reflecting, Jessie wondered how her supposedly foolproof plan had unraveled so quickly. She had assumed Mark wouldn't take drastic action and believed her infidelity would never be discovered. However, her plan had backfired spectacularly. 2 emails deepened her despair. The first, from Diana, accused her of destroying a marriage and jeopardizing the future of Craig's children. The second email was from Chloe, who attached one of Jessie's letters to Craig and asked, "Why did you lie to us, Mom?" Jessie realized her children were now part of her punishment, and Chloe's anger took on a new, troubling meaning. Jessie replied to Chloe, promising to explain the misunderstanding upon her return. Chloe's immediate response stung. "Strange that you chose to spend your vacation with another man instead of with Dad and us." Throughout the week, Jessie avoided the beach to prevent returning home with a tan that might confirm suspicions. She sent a long, vague letter to Chloe, emphasizing errors in judgment and her feelings of being undervalued as a wife and mother. She insisted again that she had never been unfaithful to Mark, but made no genuine apology, confident her strong position as a breadwinner shielded her. Meanwhile, Mark gathered the children to discuss their approach when Jessie returned. "Unless we hear otherwise, she'll be home Friday," he began. "What do we do?" Chloe spoke first, her tone sharp. "Her latest letter proves she sees us as inconveniences. She chose a fling over her family. Unless she changes her attitude, I'm done with her." Mark nodded. "Harsh but fair." "Ethan." "She just doesn't understand," Ethan said quietly. "I hope she can learn," Mark replied. "Leo?" "I don't care what happens to her," Leo said firmly. "I just want to stay with you." Mark smiled at his youngest, then shared his plan. "I think your mother lost her way after her promotion. If she admits her mistakes and shows remorse, we should give her a chance. If she doesn't, we'll reassess. What do you think?" Chloe hesitated but saw her siblings' need for stability. "Fine, Dad. We'll try." But her letter shows no remorse. "Oddly, I do believe she's never been unfaithful." Mark nodded. "That's why I've planned a wake-up call for her. She needs to understand the emotional damage she's caused. If she breaks down and apologizes, we'll talk. If not, we'll decide what's next." Jessie was caught off guard when she received a letter from Chloe addressed to Mark and the children. It outlined her return timetable and sent a chill through her. According to the letter, Jessie was expected home late Friday night. Upon arrival, she would take a polygraph test with questions submitted by all 4 family members. Afterward, she would stay in a motel for 2 nights to reflect, with the option to request a family meeting after noon on Saturday. Though irritated at being told what to do, Jessie decided to play along, confident she could regain control after the polygraph. She believed the test would prove her physical fidelity and hoped it would convince Mark and smooth things over. She began speculating about the questions Mark might ask. If the test focused on whether she had been intimate with Craig or anyone else, she felt safe. However, questions about her intentions or behavior as a wife were more troubling, especially considering her history with Craig and the earlier relationship issues she hinted at. Realizing that overthinking could raise her stress levels, Jessie resolved to stay calm. When she landed, Jessie avoided telling anyone her arrival time, opting for a cab to the polygraph appointment. Instead of feeling triumphant, she arrived burdened, knowing the situation had spiraled far beyond her control. At the testing center, the technician explained the procedure and began calibration questions. Then came the first real query. 2 weeks ago, did you go to Malta with the intention of having extramarital relations with Craig Bauer? Yes, Jessie answered, her voice steady. The technician checked the readings, made a note, and closed the test. That's it? Jessie asked, stunned. Just one question. The technician replied, yes, and I suspect it was written by your husband. It seems he doesn't care whether you actually had an affair in Malta. He wanted confirmation of your intent. To him, your intention was enough. He gestured toward divorce lawyer cards at reception. Good luck, Mrs. Carlson, he added, using the name on her file. Reeling, Jessie realized her strategy to prove physical fidelity had completely missed the mark. In rage, she made an impulsive decision. She jumped into a cab and headed home, convinced she needed to confront Mark directly. As she approached the house, Mark, Ethan, and Leo watched from a parked car across the street. They silently exchanged glances, relieved they had prepared for this moment the night before. Unwilling to engage in a confrontation in front of the children, Mark drove them away to the motel where Jessie's room was waiting, their phones turned off to avoid further contact. Jessie didn't reach out to the family until late Monday, shattering any hope that she had used the weekend to reflect. That night, Mark received a letter from Chloe delivering Jessie's message. The letter accused Mark of using low tactics by involving the children against her and informed him of an emergency family court hearing her lawyer was organizing to decide temporary custody of Ethan and Leo. Jessie also announced she had scheduled a psychologist session for the family and a meeting on Wednesday night to discuss the future. Jessie spent the weekend crafting a strategy to salvage her position. Her plan focused on 3 fronts: saving her marriage through counseling, choosing a counselor she assumed would favor her perspective, explaining her actions to the children during family sessions, and securing legal advantages if divorce became inevitable. On Tuesday, Jessie was already seated in the counselor's office when Mark arrived. The counselor greeted him warmly and directed them to sit in chairs facing her, though spaced apart. After introductions, Jessie insisting on her first name while Mark chose Mr. Brown in the sign-in forms, the counselor invited Jessie to speak first. Jessie recounted their marriage, claiming, "I was a faithful wife and mother until I made a terrible mistake, lied to my family, and went on a date with another man. There was no physical intimacy as my behavior shows, but the intent was there. I regret my actions and wish to move forward with my marriage." The counselor then turned to Mark. He spoke plainly. "My children's main grievance is their mother's lies. She used her vacation to leave us and deliberately avoided contact by leaving her phone behind. And no, I did not hire anyone to surveil her in Malta." Jessie looked stunned. She had assumed surveillance would be his first move. Mark continued, "I didn't want to believe she was seeing someone until our daughter hacked her email and found the plans she made with her lover. I canceled the credit cards only after Chloe discovered Jessie's attempts to block family finances, leaving me powerless." Jessie was speechless, realizing her daughter had exposed her precautions and interpreted them as betrayal. Mark's tone hardened. "As for her intentions in these sessions, pardon me for not believing a word she says." The counselor asked Mark, "What do you hope to achieve here?" "I want to understand why my wife thought it was acceptable to lie and plan to be with another man," he replied. At this moment, their marriage might have had a chance, until the counselor muttered, "Oh, we have a dinosaur." Mark froze. He concluded Jessie had chosen a counselor biased against him and stormed out. Rather than running after him to apologize, Jessie vented her frustration at the counselor. By the time she was done, Mark was gone. The counselor apologized to Jessie and convinced her to schedule another session. She also contacted Mark to apologize and offered him a solo session. The family meeting on Wednesday fared no better. Jessie invited them to dinner beforehand, but Chloe bluntly declined, reminding her mother she couldn't cook. They agreed to arrive at 7:30 p.m. When they walked in, Jessie attempted hugs, but they all responded coldly. As they sat together on the couch, leaving Jessie alone across from them, she tried to coax Chloe to her side. Chloe refused. Disheartened, Jessie launched into her prepared speech. It was light on apologies and heavy on excuses. She claimed she felt unappreciated as a woman and breadwinner, lamented her husband's routine attention, and admitted she had missed the admiration single women enjoy. She justified her actions by saying she had succumbed to the flattery of a younger man. The cold, unyielding expressions of her family made it clear trust had been broken, and there was no going back. During Jessie's speech, she directed her attention at Ethan and Leo, avoiding Mark's gaze, while Chloe sat scribbling notes, her irritation evident. Finally, Chloe broke the silence. "You've really let me down again, Mom." "What? Why?" Jessie asked, startled. "I'd give you 85% on the cliché test. If you'd added that no one gets hurt if they don't find out, you'd score 100%, Chloe retorted. Jessie flushed, unsure if it was from anger or embarrassment. She realized her children weren't going to sympathize with her, while Mark held their trust. "Mark," she said sharply, to the kitchen. "Now." Behind the closed door, Jessie hissed, "Does it really have to come to this, Mark? Me breaking you until you beg for forgiveness?" Mark sighed, saddened by her combative nature. "It doesn't have to. If you'd simply do what's right, none of this would be inevitable. If you drop that counselor and—" "Wait. I'll see you in court, Jessie," Mark cut her off. On Thursday, Mark moved into a 3-bedroom rental house, aware the situation wouldn't resolve soon. He learned the custody hearing for Ethan and Leo was scheduled for Tuesday. After hearing which judge was assigned, Mark called Max, who noted the judge had a history of siding against fathers. Despite this, Mark declined formal representation, opting to represent himself. Max offered advice about court procedures, and Mark prepared carefully. Mark focused on his children's well-being, spending the weekend setting up their new home. Around the table, he explained his plans honestly. The kids brightened as they joined in, helping to research and plan for their future. On Tuesday, Jessie's attorney was surprised Mark planned to represent himself, recognizing the challenge Jessie might face under his questioning. Due to delays, the court only addressed procedural matters, with the hearing continuing the next day. By Wednesday, local reporters had caught wind of the case. The courtroom was abuzz with anticipation as Jessie's attorney began detailing property ownership and earning power before Mark had his turn to question Jessie. Reporters in attendance noted her visible nervousness. Mark stood, his tone calm and deliberate. "Jessie, I built our family home with my own hands, correct?" "Yes," she admitted quietly. "And I earned most of the money for our household, while you returned to work 2 months after each child was born, correct?" "Yes," she replied, avoiding his gaze. He continued, "And who prepared our children's meals? Breakfasts, school lunches, and dinners?" Jessie shifted uncomfortably. "I worked long hours," she responded defensively. "So would you say I was the primary caregiver for our children?" Mark asked pointedly. "Probably," she conceded. Mark's tone sharpened as he shifted topics. "You recently lied to me and our children, then went to Malta for 2 weeks intending to be with another man. Isn't that true?" Jessie's attorney immediately objected. "Objection, Your Honor. Infidelity is irrelevant in custody disputes." Mark maintained his composure. "Your Honor, I'm not focusing on infidelity. I'm questioning my wife's character as a fit mother." The judge considered briefly. Objection overruled. Jessie bristled and attempted to explain. "I went to Malta for a vacation and happened to go with a male friend," she said, her voice strained. Mark pressed on, holding up a sheet of paper. "And before you left, did you leave this letter for me?" Without waiting for a direct answer, he read the letter aloud. Each word resonated in the silent courtroom. Reporters scribbled furiously, and Jesse's furious silence spoke louder than any denial. Mark's voice cut through the tension. Upon returning, did you apologize to your husband or your children for your lies and your intention to betray our marriage? The courtroom fell silent, the weight of the question hanging in the air. Again, Jessie remained silent, her expression steely. Mark concluded, Your Honor, the decision here is straightforward. I've always been the primary caregiver. The children should remain with me in the home I built where they've grown up. Unlike my wife, I've not lied or betrayed my family. I request full custody and for my wife to stop negatively influencing our children. Mark sat with his back to Jessie, ignoring her seething glare. The judge wasted no time delivering her ruling. Temporary custody of the children and the family home would go to Jessie, citing studies favoring mothers in divorce cases. Jessie smiled triumphantly, but Mark remained composed. He had anticipated this outcome. Standing, he addressed the court. Your Honor, I'd like to reference your rulings in similar cases where custody was awarded to the primary caregiver. He listed precedents and cited studies debunking the notion that children are always better off with their mother. So tell me, Your Honor, can a man with his own perspective ever win in your court? The judge, caught off guard, quickly closed the session. Mark handed copies of Jessie's incriminating letter to reporters before walking out without looking back. Jessie's lawyer congratulated her, but her victory felt hollow. Mark's remarks about her lack of remorse had struck a nerve. Instead of reflection, Jessie's instinct to fight kicked in. Mark, guided by advice from Chloe, escalated his efforts. He filed a complaint with the federal court president, alleging judicial bias. That weekend, he moved into a rental home with the children and spent time fixing it up, involving them in planning their new future. On Tuesday, Jessie's lawyer was again surprised to learn Mark intended to represent himself in the custody hearing. In court, Mark's calm questioning highlighted his role as the primary caregiver and Jessie's dishonesty. Reporters eagerly documented her visible discomfort. Mark read Jessie's damning letter aloud, her silence speaking volumes. He concluded, Your Honor, I've always been my children's primary caregiver. My wife's actions show she lacks the character to properly influence our children. Custody should remain with me. Newspaper articles the next day criticized both Jessie and the judge. Meanwhile, Jessie's strained relationship with the children worsened. They reluctantly spent time at her house but refused to engage. Jessie struggled with basic tasks like making school lunches and relied on canteen money instead. At a solo counseling session, Jessie laid out conditions for taking Mark back and confessed to 2 earlier inappropriate relationships, emphasizing there was no physical intimacy, though she admitted this wasn't by her choice. She couldn't understand why Mark was so offended, as she believed intent didn't matter if nothing physical had happened. The counselor warned reconciliation was unlikely due to Mark's focus on her dishonesty and intentions. The next day, Mark's session with the counselor was brief. He demanded either a referral to someone impartial or a declaration that the marriage was irretrievable. Fearful of damaging her career further, the counselor chose the latter and reported the dissolution of the marriage. At home, Mark found Ethan and Leo settled in. A police officer arrived citing a court order, but the children refused to leave. When Jessie arrived, she demanded, Mark, just tell the kids to come with me. Give me the house, and I'll be generous with visitation and property division. Jessie, leave, Mark replied. I won't force them into something that violates their sense of right and wrong. Mark, I'm not a bad person. You know me. No, I don't, Mark said coldly. The woman I married wouldn't have done this. She wouldn't have betrayed me, shown no remorse, or tried to force me into accepting her behavior. I found out yesterday about your 2 earlier affairs. What did I do to deserve this? And what's your plan now? Realizing the counselor had revealed her secrets, Jessie blushed with anger and guilt. Unable to lash out at Mark, she seethed internally. She's not allowed to tell you that, Jessie snapped, her frustration evident as her grasp on the situation continued to unravel. Mark remained silent as Jessie stormed out. Later, he erased the recording Ethan had placed in Jessie's purse before her counseling session, confident justice would soon catch up with the counselor. He was right. 3 days later, the counselor was dismissed. On Saturday, Children's Services arrived to enforce the custody ruling, but Ethan and Leo refused to leave without being forcibly removed. When the officers explained the court's decision, Ethan shot back. "Then the courts were wrong. We won't live with someone who hurt our father." The officers left, unable to resolve the situation. Jessie spent the next week trying to reconcile with her children, but they ignored her calls and deleted her messages. Attempts to speak with Mark ended abruptly when he realized she wasn't apologizing. Frustrated, Mark hired Max as his divorce attorney. With Chloe's help, he discovered Jessie was preparing for another business trip. Taking vacation time, Mark dedicated himself to helping the children adjust and prepare for their future. When Jessie returned on Friday, she was stunned. The award-winning house she had cherished was gone, replaced by a damaged structure purchased at an insurance auction. Inside, she found her belongings neatly packed, new locks installed, and a copy of the title deed on the floor. The document confirmed that while she owned the land, the house was no longer hers. She called her lawyer, only to confirm that the arrangement was legal, realizing Chloe had taken control of the family trusts. Jessie cursed her arrogance in assuming her children would side with her. Consumed by anger and self-pity, she wrote a letter to her children asking, "Do you really hate me that much?" Mark replied simply, "We don't hate you. You knew I would always protect our family, even from you." On Monday, Jessie received Mark's divorce filing at work. The agreement seemed generous at first, granting her full ownership of the jointly acquired property. However, deductions included the Malta trip expenses, divorce costs, and penalties for her financial maneuvers. Custody would be determined by the children's preferences, with Leo's decision acting as the tiebreaker. When Jessie tried to revoke the children's trusts, her financial advisor informed her it was impossible. "He planned everything perfectly," the advisor admitted. Jessie attempted to appoint a new counselor, but since the first had declared the marriage irretrievable, she needed Mark's consent, which he refused. He reminded her that he had suggested a neutral counselor weeks earlier, but she had rejected the idea. Now it was too late. Realizing she had no better option, Jessie signed the divorce agreement. Though she retained custody and access to the trusts as the children's guardian, she lost the second parcel of land and other assets. The divorce proceeded quickly once finalized, leaving Jessie to face the consequences of her actions alone. Jessie's lawyer assured her the case would remain under the same family court judge, who was known for bias. He admitted he usually advised male clients to concede under this judge, confident in her victory, and planned to leave Mark destitute. Jessie relaxed. She even toyed with the idea of magnanimously returning to his life on her terms, or leaving him to his supposed poverty. A month later, Jessie entered the courtroom feeling confident, but was greeted by her nervous lawyer. He pointed out a woman in a suit seated in the gallery. "She works for the chief federal judge. Something's going on, and I don't like it," he muttered, unsettling Jessie. The judge opened the session by announcing her early retirement, her tone bitter. As the hearing began, Jessie's lawyer objected to Mark's request for her to cover legal fees, suggesting they each pay their own. Max countered that he was working pro bono. The case quickly turned against Jessie. Max presented compelling evidence of Mark's role as the primary caregiver, while Jessie's lawyer, relying on the judge's usual leniency, was unprepared. The judge, glancing frequently at the woman in the gallery, appeared constrained and insincere. Her ruling awarded Mark custody and praised his generous property division offer. Jessie was left stunned, barely registering the final gavel. Back at her one-bedroom apartment, Jessie felt defeated but had no time for self-pity. She still had to finalize the sale of her old property, which she had listed in anticipation of a favorable financial outcome. The unique lot, once beautifully landscaped, required a specific type of house, making the sale price low. At the settlement meeting, she prepared to hand over the title deeds, but was told the buyers would arrive shortly. When Mark's car arrived, followed by trucks carrying her old house and a crane, Jessie realized he was the buyer. Stunned, she left without a word. Back at her apartment, Jessie stared at the meager check representing the wreckage of her once prosperous life. She picked up her thought journal, and in bold red letters, wrote, "Next time you get an itch, go to a pharmacy. Next time you mess up, apologize. You're twice as smart as you think you are." 8 weeks later, Jessie decided to extend an olive branch. She purchased champagne and went to her former property to congratulate its new owners and share her humility. Jessie drove there with a bottle of champagne beside her, the golden label glinting in the sunlight. She had rehearsed this moment a dozen times, imagining a warm reception and perhaps the beginning of a new chapter, one rooted in humility and reconciliation. As she approached the driveway, she was struck by the transformation. The house Mark had built with such care had been restored to its former glory, standing as a testament to the resilience she had underestimated in her husband. When she knocked on the door, Chloe answered. The expression on her daughter's face was guarded but not hostile, giving Jessie a flicker of hope. "Hi, Mom," Chloe said flatly, stepping aside to let her in. Inside, Jessie saw the dining table set for a family dinner. Mark and the boys were arranging dishes, their laughter filling the room. The warmth of the scene made Jessie feel like an intruder. She handed the champagne to Chloe, who raised an eyebrow, but took it without comment. Mark looked up and met Jessie's gaze. His face was calm, devoid of malice, but also lacking the affection she had once taken for granted. "Jessie," he said simply, nodding in acknowledgement. "I wanted to say congratulations on the house," Jessie began, her voice faltering slightly. "It looks wonderful. You've done an amazing job." "Thanks," Mark replied, returning to the table. His focus on the meal rather than her words stung, but she pressed on. "I also wanted to apologize," Jessie said louder this time. The room grew quiet as everyone's attention shifted to her. "I made so many mistakes. I hurt all of you, and I'm truly sorry. I hope you can forgive me someday." Leo's voice broke the silence. "Why did you do it, Mom?" he asked, his tone a mix of curiosity and hurt. "Didn't we matter to you?" Tears welled up in Jessie's eyes. "You mattered more than anything," she said, her voice trembling. "I just lost sight of that. I thought I needed something more, something different, and I was wrong. You all deserved better from me." Chloe crossed her arms. "So what now?" she asked, her skepticism evident. "You've said sorry, but sorry doesn't fix everything." Jessie nodded, acknowledging the truth in her daughter's words. "You're right," she admitted. "I don't expect everything to go back to how it was. I just want the chance to show you that I'm trying to be better." Mark finally spoke, his tone measured. "Jessie, I'm glad you're reflecting, but the trust we had is gone. And trust is the foundation of any relationship. It'll take time and consistent effort to rebuild, if that's even possible." "I understand," Jessie said softly. "I'm not here to ask for anything today. I just wanted to apologize and let you know I'm taking steps to change. I've started seeing a therapist and joined a support group for people who've made similar mistakes. It's helping me understand what led me here." The sincerity in her voice seemed to reach them, though no one responded immediately. After a moment, Ethan spoke up. "It's good you're doing that," he said cautiously. "But actions speak louder than words, Mom." "I know," Jessie replied. "And I'm prepared to show you through my actions that I'm committed to making amends." Mark stood and walked to the door, opening it as a silent cue that the conversation was over. "Thank you for coming by, Jessie," he said. "Take care of yourself." Jessie nodded, understanding she had to leave. As she walked back to her car, she glanced at the house. It was filled with the love and unity she had jeopardized, but now longed to protect, even from afar. Over the next year, Jessie dedicated herself to rebuilding her life. She focused on her career, volunteering, and maintaining the personal growth she had promised her family. Though her interactions with Mark and the children remained infrequent, they were civil, and slowly, glimmers of warmth began to reappear. At Chloe's suggestion, Jessie began writing letters to her children, sharing memories and reflections without expecting replies. One day, she received a response from Leo. It was short but hopeful. "Thanks for your letter, Mom. I'm not ready to talk yet, but I'm glad you're trying." That single sentence was enough to renew Jessie's resolve. She knew the road to redemption would be long, but she was willing to walk it, one small step at a time.